Hello and welcome to this week's Aiding Your Game. So last week we talked a little bit about the video series that we were putting together, and its focus is just on GMs. How can you become a better GM? How can you as a GM improve your gaming and GM styles and abilities and handle on the game? How can you as a player determine a good GM for you? And how can we as a community help each other find the right GM for each of us? We broke it down into 3 videos that we're really going to kind of dive into. This is the first of those 3 videos, all about rules integration and management. Now, before we jump into this video, please make sure to go down and hit that subscribe button to help us grow. If you don't mind the notifications, be sure to hit that bell. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoy our content. And be sure to leave a comment down below on what you think of this content, as well as content that you'd like us to cover in future videos. And in the spirit of growing our community, be sure to share this with others who may enjoy this content and other content that we provide. Now, as mentioned in the last video, this video series is all based on my opinion and my experiences specifically with role-playing. And we're going to focus on Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition just because it is arguably the largest RPG that's out there and is discussed and known. However, this content we want to keep at a GM level so that it's applicable to different role-playing games and game systems. With that being said, because we're going to be focusing and really diving in with an eye on Dungeons & Dragons, that's what we'll be focusing on and referencing. So over my many years of role-playing experience, primarily as a GM, but also as a player, one of the most commonly asked questions, especially in the last 5 years, where do I start DMing? Now, this is such an onion of a topic because there are so many layers to becoming a GM. With experience, obviously, that's one of the best opportunities to grow and develop into a GM role. However, sometimes we don't have a choice. We're in a small area with limited amount of gamers, and somebody has to step up and assume the mantle of GM. Or you have friends who are interested in trying it out and you get elected to become a GM. Regardless of how you decide to put on your GM robes, you ultimately have a very exciting but also a very challenging road ahead of you. Now, my first tip for people who are in this position, just thinking about or just starting their GMing experience, the very first thing I tell people is make sure you have a good handle on the rules, regardless of what system you have. Again, we're going to focus on Dungeons & Dragons, but regardless of the system, an understanding of the rules is very key. Because while creating a story and creating a world and setting up scenarios and encounters and looking at how you can challenge your players and really work to create that collective story with the gamers around your table, the primary role of a GM is going to be as a referee. Now, as a referee, if you don't have a good handle on the rules, it's not easy for you to make calls that everybody is going to, 1, respect, 2, follow, and 3, not challenge back. While there is that common post out there that GM is God, or my way or the highway, or never challenge the GM, if a GM makes an incorrect call, in my opinion, it's okay to be challenged by a player. And that's where having a firm understanding of the rules comes in handy. Because if you make a questionable call and you can recite back why you made that call and give justification for your ruling as a GM, it's going to, 1, show that you have a handle on the game and that you know what you're doing. It's also going to eliminate future challenges that may come up down the road on the same type of subject. 3, it's going to reiterate to your players that you are the GM and you are going to process the game following a standard. Now, whether those are house rules you've established ahead of time or rules right out of the published materials, a basic and good thorough understanding of the rules is a great place to start. And I always tell people to start at the player's handbook level. Know what players can do on their turns. They have an action, they have a bonus action, and they have movement. Sometimes they'll also have a reaction, and knowing the process of what players can and can't do is the basic starting foundation. Because if you have a good handle on what they can and can't do, you're going to know right off the bat whether or not they can or can't do something or attempt to do something, and assist with player management, especially as newer players are coming into the table, being able to assist them and guiding them on their player's journey by having a good firm grasp on what player action economy is, on what that character can do in their turn, is going to set you up for a large amount of success. For instance, if a player character attempts to cast 2 spells in a turn, unless you've homebrewed that it's allowable, you can direct that player to change up what they're doing or what they're expecting to do based on the rules, because they can't cast 2 actions in a turn, generally speaking. So by having a good grasp, if a player makes an announcement that they want to cast 2 spells on a turn, you can quickly remind them that they're not able to cast 2 spells in a turn, which is going to direct them going forward and make their turn rules-based flow according to what the rule standards are, again, whether those are homebrew or printed. But also it's going to kind of cut off other players from trying to manage that player character into kind of rules lawyering. This is going to be beneficial for a couple of ways. One, the player who may not know better and is attempting to cast 2 spells is going to quickly realize that they need to rethink their turn, but it's also going to keep them from being kind of rules lawyered by other players, which can often be a quick turn-off switch for new players if they feel like someone else is trying to dictate how they can play their character or what they're doing. If it's coming from a peer, it can sometimes be not as well received. So this isn't always the case, but by being the GM giving this information out, it can feel more like a guide or a referee or just a good GM reminding them what their allowance per turn is. So having a good grasp on the rules kind of can shut down that rules lawyering, which can cause a lot of dissent and tension at the table, as well as elevate you to a new level of respect from new players and experienced players alike, because, oh, they know what they're doing. They're going to manage the table. They're going to make sure that we follow the rules as written, or the rules as we agreed on our session 0, or the house rules that have been put in place and have been communicated out really well. So having a good grasp from the player's aspect, what can a player do, is the most important first step as a GM you can take. Understand what player characters can do, what player characters can achieve, in as much as how many weapons can they attune to, what are allowable armors for different classes. Again, you don't need to have all of the details. You don't need to memorize the effects of every single spell in all of the printed materials as well as UA, but having a good basic understanding of the primary rules that are going to be most impactful for players moving through your story with their characters is going to be a key element in your success. After you have a good basic understanding of those key elements and those primary player character aspects of the game, you can then move on to the environment as a whole, starting to understand what does challenge rating mean and how can I utilize it to set up encounters or events that the characters are going to encounter to make them challenging, interesting, unique, different, but unless you're looking for something else, attainable and achievable. By understanding how to make challenges and set your challenge ratings, whether it's for locks and picking locks, whether it's for traps and detecting traps, or having to overcome traps through different ability checks, whether it's making saving throws against environmental issues like weather or poisonous gas clouds, whatever the case may be. Understanding the basics of how to set challenges that are appropriate for the story and for the challenges you want to present to your characters is going to be the next important key. If, for instance, you're doing something where the player should look for and find a clue, if you want that clue to be well hidden, that should have a higher DC, a higher challenge rating to find the clue. Now, if you want them to find the clue, then you could leave it in plain sight. So understanding how to set and maintain and manage challenge ratings is super important. This is the mechanical aspect of our storytelling. This is the technical aspect where we allow the abilities and the skills to be determined based on the choices that the characters use when they're building their character, whether that's with selecting feats or backgrounds, whether that's how they do their ability rolls, whether it's rolls or point buy or standard array. These basic building blocks, along with the roll of the dice, can determine success or failure. So setting things up that are appropriate to our story is going to be very important, especially as we continue to build upon these basic blocks and keep consistency going forward. Locks that are extremely difficult in a palace or a keep should be the norm. They should not have locks that vary from door to door for the most part. Consistency and consistent challenge ratings are a beneficial aspect of technical GM management to make sure that the storytelling blends in with the technical aspects of role playing. Again, by understanding the basic foundations of how we set our challenge ratings, for instance, if we're looking at some type of standard or average piece, we know we put that DC at 10. If it's harder, it's higher. If it's easier, it's lower. And then allowing the characters to roll against that with their bonuses allows us to manage the technical aspect of our storytelling so that we have difficult environments for our player characters to experience in the game. Now, depending if you're more interested in the technical aspect or more interested in the storytelling aspect, there are times where you choose that those challenge ratings just can be completed and they don't have to roll for them, or they have very low DCs. There are times where you want those technical aspects to really be nail biters and have them on the edge of their seat. So you want to draw them out and make them challenging. But in the same aspect, you don't want to be taken advantage of. For instance, if you've got a door that is locked and needs to be picked, having each player character attempt to do it one after the other, one, it drags the game down, and two, it kind of breaks the whole spirit of a character. If a rogue can't pick a lock, but a barbarian can, it just kind of loses some of the appeal for someone to play a rogue if they're not able to do something that they should be able to do. So again, understanding how to challenge, and I would say almost correctly challenge, player characters is going to be a key to your success. One of the next most important things you want to really focus on from a rules management and table management aspect is maintaining control. This can be really challenging, especially if you're a newer GM or you have challenges just really asserting yourself. There are times where you want to take a back seat and just let the characters go and let the players dive into characters with things like role-playing and exploring and really driving the story forward and creating their own narrative and really exploring each other's stories and creating story together. So there are times where you really want to step back and let them drive. But there are plenty of times where you as a GM will need to step up and kind of take the reins and do that driving. While this by no means is about building rails that your story is going to go on indefinitely, this is more about managing the players and the progress of your story. In your groups, you can find very easily that one or a couple of people may really kind of take leadership roles and really do a lot of the deciding factors and kind of take the central stage and have the spotlight on them a lot. As a GM, that may be the type of play that you enjoy and you've already agreed to it. So again, a lot of this is going to vary from table to table. However, I've found that a lot of opportunity can be found for a GM to really manage the table and make sure that that spotlight is shared with everybody. Players are able to choose different races and classes just so they have opportunities to explore those races and classes and ultimately should have time to shine. By managing your table, the story elements, and understanding some of those basic building blocks of the rule set, you can create encounters and really direct the traffic and kind of guide things around so that each character has their moments to shine. Each character can bring elements of their storytelling into the overall storytelling sessions, and you're not allowing anybody to get sidelined. Again, the more experience you have with your players and around your table, you're going to really be able to gauge people a little bit better. Empathy is really going to come into play here, as well as being able to read body language and open, strong communication. By pulling information out from your players, you'll understand what type of game they want to play. In your session 0, you'll be able to really establish your ground rules and kind of get information to be able to highlight each of the characters in the story in different ways and shapes and forms. So making sure to manage that table and allow things to follow with expectations for the players as well as expectations for the GM is super important. And again, the easiest way to do this is having good understanding of what the player characters are capable and kind of designed for, and then understanding how to set up challenges and environments that allow your player characters to shine. By taking that leadership role, you can build out that story and have those moments that are going to highlight what the characters are capable of. You're going to be able to challenge them in ways that the players will feel rewarded and satisfied for overcoming. And you're going to be able to make sure that it's a communal effort, that everybody has their opportunity to bring elements into the success or failures of your stories. As just a partial quick recap, we've started with the characters and understanding the basic building blocks of character rules, and then expanded that to their immediate environment and understanding how to set up challenge ratings and really allow the characters to function. Beyond that, we start looking at the broader piece in our own realms, on our worlds, in our systems. What are the effects? What are the rules of that? This gets a little more advanced, and not all GMs are going to be ready for this. But if the characters are functioning in their turns and their action economies and having an impact on their immediate environment, whether that's a dungeon delve, whether that is some type of a printed material like Rime of the Frost Maiden, then we have to start looking at the kind of rules of the world. What happens when those encounters become resolved one way or another with success or failure? Is there any type of action that follows afterwards that we can build our stories on? We need to start thinking about the larger picture in the worlds that we're playing in. What are the general rules of that world? For instance, if the player characters clear out a bandit hideout along the highway in between two well-populated towns, is another bandit party going to come in and try to claim that? Are the characters going to try to claim that as kind of their home base? What impacts does that have to the two city-states kind of bordering that base? Is one of the city-states going to try to burn it down, take it over, build some type of a keep, tax the player characters for keeping it? There are different types of rule sets that we have to think about on a larger scale. Now, this type of piece can really be taken in two different directions, in my opinion. Published materials really have a lot of depth and history that you can refer to see kind of how in the past these things have developed and kind of been resolved and what those implications were in the past. You can use this to build on and continue moving in the same direction forward. Or you can come up with your own kind of ideas. After all, these realms are our realms to build and create and make our own. So what are the rules that are going to incorporate your world to have reactions to what your characters are doing in their immediate environment? Understanding that city-states may not want to surrender and give up property very easily. Understanding that there may be some type of positive or negative repercussions based on what your player characters have completed or addressed or attacked or challenged or changed in your game world. We have to understand the basics of how is the societies around them, whether that's looking at township, region, kingdom, world, whatever the scale may be. We have to look at how is that going to affect what we've done in game. Now, that last aspect is definitely a bigger part of it, and generally not to be too concerned for new GMs. However, for more advanced GMs, it's definitely something to start thinking about and looking at and diving into. Now, in our introduction video, we talked a little bit about the difference between homebrew and pre-published materials. New GMs, one of the easiest things to do after you have your two basic pieces, understanding character economy, and then understanding challenge rating and setting up encounters for your characters. The next one is really familiarizing yourself with the material you're going to be running. Now, I really recommend for newer GMs to make sure that they're using published materials. It doesn't matter if it's Curse of Strahd, it doesn't matter if it's Dead and Thay, it doesn't matter what published materials you're going to be using. Going through and reading it a few times is going to really familiarize yourself with the rails of the story. What happens from encounter to encounter, and what kind of actions are going to happen when those pieces come together. Adventure modules have always been designed to kind of guide characters through a setting, a set prominent encounter or series of encounters that are going to impact them as characters. They'll have to overcome challenges, they'll have to address different encounters and obstacles, and ultimately it's designed for the characters to confront these challenges, overcome these challenges, and then grow through experience, through rewards, and continue on in adventuring life. So knowing the story kind of inside and out is definitely a key, because if your characters don't follow each challenge as presented, knowing how that module world is going to have to react to parts they skipped or parts they went ahead on is really going to allow you to manage the table, manage the story, and continue things going forward and feel cohesive without having to pause because you don't know. That's my interpretation of, for newer GMs, the world aspect or the larger picture. Understanding your environment, understanding the overall story, understanding the adventure module, that's basically the world that you're going to be running your player characters through, is the third most important aspect. So whether you're a home brewer, experienced GM working on a grand scale of a world, or cosmos even, or you're a newer GM just working through a module, or an experienced GM just working through a module, understanding what that module's goal is and how the environment and overall story setting is going to be impacted by the actions of your character allows you to let the characters just kind of go. You don't have to keep them on tight rails. You can continue to drive the story forward, make adjustments as you need to, because you have good understanding of what the player characters are capable of. You have good understanding of how to challenge your players, and you have a good understanding of the world environment to react to anything that they may be doing. And while reading through all the rules and really getting this grip is one of the more challenging pieces for many people, I say this is the basic building block of what makes a GM good. This is what makes a GM even better than good, because a good GM can grab a printed material and run a number of characters through that adventure. There may be stumbling blocks. They may have to stop and look at things and look up things and kind of make some rulings on the fly. A better GM is going to be able to integrate and be reactive to the characters' actions in the game in a way that is going to be more cohesive and feel more timed, immersive, and really delving into the ambiance of the story. So those three aspects are really going to allow a GM to be better than just a good GM. Now, of course, this is all opinion. There may be good GMs who can just off the cuff create and really keep cohesiveness and allow for their players to manage their character actions themselves and not have read a rule at all. I'm not disputing that at all. But if you want to look at good GMing, better GMing, and the best GMs, they've got a handle on the technical aspect of the game in as much as what character economy is, how they can challenge the characters in their stories, and what the effects are based on the character actions that they can be reactive to and really have a story build up around what the characters do. And by having a firm grasp on these aspects, they're able to do it very tangibly and make it feel like there is no uncertainty or change or alterations. This can be a flowing piece that feels all pre-planned, because in a large part it is. By having a good understanding of those three aspects of gaming, you're able to continue driving story forward based on whatever freedoms you give your player characters. Whatever the characters are doing in the story, you're able to continue that story building process, that storytelling process in a cohesive and forward moving manner. So for this video, the basics are building blocks of technical understanding of the rules is going to be the most important thing that makes better GMs. Now make sure you join us next week, because we're going to talk about the storytelling aspect and what makes GMs great in their storytelling aspects. We're going to have a lot of information to cover on that one. That one is probably going to be a little bit longer. We're going to try to keep it very digestible. We may even have to split it into two. We're still working on the editing as this video is being recorded. So be sure to check back next week. Until then, make sure you crack those rule books, get those rules down, and continue growing to become better GMs. I hope you enjoyed that video. Here's a link to another video that you may enjoy. Also, make sure you hit that subscribe button to help us grow. If you'd like to support us, make sure you check out the description of the video with some links and leave a comment to let us know where will your adventures take you.